I'm going to record. Okay. All right, so we are recording. We are ready to roll. My goal today really is to make this applicable. We've been doing these presentations forever in the Career Center, and I think dining is getting less and less formal as time ticks on. So we're not going to talk about all of the itty-bitty rules of fine dining or how to hold a fork or things like that. But now my goal is more, if you're in a networking situation, if you're in an opportunity where you're invited to have a nice meal with somebody, how do we get through that without making a fool out of ourselves? Or even like if you go to a wedding or something like that, kind of just the life skills. A couple years ago, I was at a friend's wedding, and so we're at the big table, with 8 different folks, and I could tell it was that awkward moment where everybody was thirsty, but nobody knew what their water glass was. And so nobody could grab for their water. And so I kind of just hopped in and I shared a trick that we'll learn today. And they all went, "What do you do for a living?" And I told them I'm in the Career Center. I help with this. And so we all made it through the meal, I think, a lot better versus that weird standoff of I want water, but which is mine? Or I want a roll, but how do I do that? How do I grab that out of the center of the table? So life goals or life application today. Feel free to throw questions in the chat as we go. I'll try and stop periodically and see if there are questions you all have. And even if it's not totally connected to what we're talking about, but it's something you're wondering about, feel free to ask. I know a lot of families now don't sit down and eat at the dinner table together like people did a lot of years ago. And so there might just be some things that you're curious about that we can touch on as well. So if we were all in a giant banquet room together, this is one of the first things I always have on the screen, which just helps us with the flow. So anytime you're in in a fancy dining situation, there are some things you can do before you even get started to help out the servers and just make sure nothing spills and everything's out of the way. So if you have a jacket with you, you'll go ahead and put that on a coat rack. If there's a coat rack, we don't want to put them hanging on the back of our chair because especially if we have folks who are bringing food to us, they could trip over that. And so we're going to look, where's the best spot to get all of my things out of the way? If you have a backpack or a purse, tuck that out of the way as well. Backpacks, you're probably going to look for a corner of the room to leave it if you can. If you're sitting at a table and you have a purse, I like to wrap the strap of my purse around it so it's not long and hanging out into the walkway. And I either put it under my chair or under the table or kind of hang it on my knee under the table just to make sure nobody trips over anything. I also try to make sure when I'm going into a nice dining situation, I bring as little as I possibly can. So I don't bring my big purse. I bring just like a wallet with my phone and my credit card. And if I can if I can get away with not wearing a jacket, let's say it's spring and it's a short walk into a building, I'll just leave my coat wherever it is. Because sometimes people haven't thought to have a coat rack or a place to put things, and then it just gets a little bit more awkward and we all have to walk around with backpacks at a networking event, and that's not really comfortable. So the key thing is keeping paths clear, especially when people are serving food. Because imagine them coming out with a big bowl of soup. We don't want that soup spilling on anybody because they tripped over something. So we'll help them out there. Also, cell phones, we're going to silence them. We're going to tuck them away because it can be really distracting. So even today, I have my phone and I have to have it in front of me for a clock because on my computer right now, I can't see the clock at all and I want to get everybody out of here on time. And I noticed when I do that, it's super distracting because the email pops up and it's not really that important because it's from a hiking app. But now my brain is looking at that. So if we can just tuck it away, if there's like an emergency reason you have to have it, I usually just excuse myself to go check my phone, pretend you're getting something from the buffet or something like that, and then you can check it and walk back. Why do you all think the cell phone thing matters? Having it put away, having it on silent. Why would that be important? Go ahead and throw that in the chat box. Hop back in here. My chat box was being difficult. Let's see what we have here. So your attention is focused on the meal. Yeah. You might seem uninterested. Absolutely. I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody on their phone and they're kind of half listening and you're like, are you listening to me? Are you bored? Absolutely. To be respectful, I see here. A lot of comments about respect. Shows your attention is focused. Yep. Can be considered rude. Trying to see if we have anything else. A lot of common themes here. Absolutely, absolutely right. Yep, and the undivided attention, so important. So for all of those reasons, and I think sometimes you eat like a really pretty meal and you're like, ooh, I'd love to take a picture of this because this is actually really well done. But we're just gonna let that go. And then the other thing you want to do when you walk into a situation is you want to introduce yourself to everybody at the table. So let's go back to that example of my friend's wedding. My husband and I were there. I didn't know anybody else at the table because this is one of those friends where you just know them and it's not a huge group in common. And so instead of just talking with my husband the whole night, we go around and say, oh, hey, how do you know Lauren? And so I met some of her other really good friends that it turns out I've heard stories about. And so just taking a moment to kind of check who you're going to be sharing that meal with can be helpful. So we've talked about why the cell phone piece, why dining etiquette matters. Honestly, in my book, it's to not make a fool out of ourselves. I don't know about any of you all. I'm a disaster sometimes with food. I have flung a meatball across the living room before accidentally. I am a klutz. And so, it's not that people are going to look at you and go, wow, you cut things so well. I need to hire you or I want to stay connected to you. It's more, how do I not drip food down myself? How do I make everybody feel included and part of the conversation? So bottom line, I think that is why this still matters and why after all these years, it's still part of this camp experience and why we didn't cut it when it went online. Okay, so here is my first question for you, and I'm going to pull up the poll. So if you all want to vote, if the invitation asks for an RSVP, and that should say let your host know. Let a couple more responses come in. We almost have everybody here. All right, let's see I'll share the results here. Can we all see the results on the page? Yeah, so we are very split. Well, so most people said both A and C. Some people said both A and B. So y'all caught on that there are a couple of possible answers here. The answer is both A and B, because so either way, you want to tell them, yes, I'm coming, no, I'm not. If it's at a restaurant, they need to know how many to make the reservation for. And if it's at, like, let's say I'm having y'all over to my house, I need to know how much food to make because I don't want anyone to be hungry, but I also don't want to eat it for 5 days afterwards. So really important to know that. Who you will bring. This depends on how the invitation is written. So if I get something that is addressed to me and guest, then I would absolutely want to tell them who I'm bringing if I'm bringing somebody. But if it just has my name on it, then I'm the only one who's invited. So you're going to take your cue that way. Okay, let's stop sharing those. And click out of this. Can you all see my PowerPoints again? Did that? Okay, perfect. Sometimes when I hop between things, it cuts it off. So those introductions, when I was looking at revamping this in light of COVID and kind of all of our changing worlds, I almost took handshakes off, but I thought I would leave it because I think we're in a weird place with handshakes. Like right now, we're not shaking anybody's hands. And employers, like when we do get back to in-person interviews, I think it's going to be a while till we shake hands again, if we even do it again, depending on how our world changes. So I used to talk about how to do a good handshake, but now in light of everything that's happening around us here, I think the important thing moving forward is going to be gauging somebody's comfort level. So if you walk up to me and say hi, and it's like one of those formal introductions where a handshake might be appropriate, if I don't stick my hand out, don't worry about the handshake, because that's a cue of like, I'm not shaking hands. Maybe I have a cold and don't want to get you sick, even once we're out of all this COVID stuff. Or I know we've got some folks that for religious purposes don't shake hands because of beliefs. And so with handshakes, it's just a lot of gauging it. If they stick their hand out, you're okay with shaking hands, absolutely shake it. Now, if you're in the camp of I'm not shaking hands right now, I've had to say this to folks before when I have a cold. I'll just say, I'm really sorry, I'm not shaking hands right now. I have a cold, I don't want to get anyone sick. I wouldn't even have to offer that back half. I could just say, I'm really sorry, I'm not shaking hands, but it's so nice to meet you as well. So there's a way to be graceful, but also mindful of the weird environment, I think, that is handshakes right now. We talked about introducing ourselves, so introduce ourselves to the whole table. If you have a name tag, this is like one of the most common problems I see. People put them really bad places. So you want it up nice and high on your right hand side. I see a lot of them where the problem is the eye goes right to the name tag. So if people put it a few inches lower, people are staring in a location we don't want to be stared at often. Or I see some down by the hip. Again, not a great place for people to be staring. So just being cognizant to get that up nice and high so it's easy to see and not weird in other capacities. So another question for you, I'm going to open up our second poll. The first thing you should do after you sit down is all right, we have most of our votes. Let's share the results. So you got it right. Put your napkin in your lap. Absolutely. So you will eventually figure out what water glass is yours probably pretty early on in the meal. If you have a suit jacket, you're typically not going to take it off during the meal. So when we say take off jackets, it's more like outerwear jackets. Now there are some occasions you might take off a suit jacket, but they're kind of slim. We're kind of just stuck with wearing it if we have it on. But the napkin, we want to keep everything clean. Again, I'll use myself as an example, super messy. I drop things. And so when that napkin is in my lap, it's going to keep my dress clean and prevent me from having to aggressively try and get a stain out later. So better just to have it ready to go. Okay. So getting started, we talked about the napkin. We're going to put it in the lap. We're not going to wear it like a bib or anything like that. When we sit at the table, we want to have good posture as well. So my tip here, to be comfortable but like still have that good posture, is scoot your bottom all the way back to your to the back of the chair. Because that way I can still lean pretty comfortably against the back of my chair, but look like I'm sitting up straight and not slouching and leaning into everything. Also, we're gonna scoot that chair in if we can. You know, you don't have to push your stomach into the table. Give yourself a little room to breathe. But if you can, scoot the chair in. A lot of people sit further back, which is just asking to spill. So the longer the distance from the table to the mouth, it gets a little trickier. If you need to leave the table, absolutely do so. You don't even need to announce it. Now, if people are kind of wondering, you might say, oh, I'll be right back. They don't need to know why. You can just leave the table. Now, if I'm leaving the table every 5 minutes, y'all are probably going to start wondering what's going on with me, because that's not normal. But if you need to take a phone call, use the restroom, blow your nose, whatever's going on, go ahead and do so. You're not stuck there. Okay, so thinking about conversation, especially when we're trying to impress people, we want to be really careful with what we say, but we still want to be genuine. Because I mean, I don't know if you all have been stuck in a situation where it's boring, right? Like, oh, the weather's great. Yeah, it's sunny. It's not raining. We run out of that real quick. So thinking about like safe conversation topics that are still interesting, in the chat box, let's have y'all throw in a couple topics that you could talk with people you've just met about that would actually still be interesting but not create controversy. Favorite movies or shows? Yep. Talk about a mutual friend. Absolutely. Where are they from? Where did you go to college? Occupation. Why are you there? What do you do for a living? Yes. Travel, hobbies, family. Travel and hobbies tend to be really easy ones. Because a lot of people are travelers, not everybody. But even if you haven't traveled, like asking, oh, if you could go anywhere, where would you go? They may have a daydream trip. So yeah, all interests, all of those. Your pets are a good one too. I have a dog, so if anybody says they have a dog, we instantly have a great conversation that we can talk about. Yeah, so those are going to be just a lot more interesting as the evening goes on. Make sure you vary the topics. So for example, let's say you have a dog and I have a dog. That's going to run its course at some point. We don't have to just talk about our dogs. We can talk about more than that. So when things start to run dry, start another thing, ask another question. The other thing it does is, let's say somebody doesn't like dogs. They like cats or birds or just not having pets in general. So if we only talk about pets the whole time, some people are going to feel left out, versus if we shift it to, oh, did you see the latest Marvel movie that came out? That's going to hit a whole nother section of the table and keep people engaged with us. Okay, so you all have a very fancy place setting in front of you. This is a little different than what was emailed, but it's similar variation. I think this is one of the most stressful things when you walk in and you see all these plates and cups and utensils and you're going, what on earth is mine? So your rule of thumb, solids are to the left, liquids are to the right. Another trick, and I actually taught this at the wedding, was you can make a B and a D with your hands, so it's backwards to you all as you're looking at me. B tells me where my bread plate is, and D tells me where my drink is. And you can just kind of subtly do it under the table just just to help you remember. And then your utensils, you're going to work outside in. So typically these meals, you're going to have multiple courses. The ones closest to the plate are for your main course. So here in this example, I have a soup spoon and a spoon for the main course. I have a knife for the salad. I have a salad fork. And then the tiny ones at the top of the plate, those are for dessert. So we're just going to let those be. You might have a coffee cup or there might be some other random things littered around your plate, but generally if we think about the B and the D and then working outside in, you'll be close enough. And if you use the wrong fork, honestly, people probably won't notice. So I've done that before where I accidentally used my dessert fork for a salad fork, and nobody's really going to care or notice. And if I need another one, I can just ask a server and say, could I get another fork, please? And they'll say, yeah, no problem, and bring me one. Where people get themselves in trouble, I think, is when they're like announcing things that don't need to be announced, because then everybody notices what's happening. So communicating with your server, one thing you can do that helps them out a lot. So when I'm in a banquet hall, I've had servers thank me for including this one. They are going to serve from the left and clear from the right. Now, if you can't remember what direction things are happening, when they come, I just stay still. Because the last thing I want to do is be weaving into talk to somebody and then weave right into the tray that they're coming at, that they're holding. So whatever we can do to help them speed up the service, they're always appreciative. I've had folks tell me horror stories of salads spilt all over guests because somebody leaned at the wrong moment, the wrong direction. If items fall on the floor, like we've been talking about, just be subtle and say, hey, can I get another of whatever? I need another fork, I need another napkin. Sometimes I kick it out of the way just so nobody trips, but you can definitely ask for more. Drinks, so this is going to really depend on where you are. So if you're in a restaurant and they say, what can I get you to drink? Then you get to pick, right? But if it's like my house, you're not going to ask me for something I don't offer. So if I say, what can I get you to drink? You might say, oh, what do you have? And I can say, I have lemonade, I have sweet tea, and I have water. And you can go from there with the options. Usually there's going to be something other than water. And the other thing I run into is tea. So we like tea in this area. Sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's unsweetened. So you can ask if they're coming around with a pitcher. You can say, is it sweetened? And then decide from there as well. All right, true or false? And let me open up this next poll. The bread plate is a good place for those wrappers, lemon slices, used utensils, all that clutter that gets all over the table. Share the results. It is true, yes. Now, some things are going to be really large and are going to fit on that bread plate, so don't make it fit if it doesn't. But you'll have all these wrappers, or depending on how your butter comes, and so when in doubt, just put it there. That's also where I like to save utensils. So let's say they give me one knife, and I've already used my knife, and I don't want to ask for another one. I might just set it on the bread plate so it keeps my table clean, but I can keep it just so I have it for the next go around, for the next course. All right, meal timing. The key thing here is pace yourself. So don't be the first, don't be the last. If you are the last person done, you're probably talking too much. If you're the first one done, you're probably not talking enough. Because oftentimes the situations we're talking about here the goal is to get to know people, not to rush through the meal. And so they've allotted more time. Today we allotted an hour because it's different. If we were in the banquet hall, we would be together about 2.5 hours for all of this, because we'd stop and we'd have a course and we'd have some conversation. And then starting the meal, just watch for an invitation. So the host, again, let's say I'm hosting all of you in my home, and I say, oh, go ahead and eat. That's your cue. Go ahead and start. So if you haven't started your lunch yet, please do so. You're probably hungry. Now, if I'm sitting at the table with you, I watch when I eat. So if I haven't issued a statement, if I have started to eat my food, that's your invitation as well. And if we're in a giant room, so let's picture, there's 20 tables in the room. COVID isn't happening. We can be in large masses again. You can't time it with the back of the room. So people are going to get food at different times. So watch the people around you immediately. Or like if you're waiting and saying, oh, can I leave? The meal's over. I just take a peek around, because sometimes we'll go back to the wedding example. Sometimes the back of the room is just getting their main course. So I should probably stay situated at my table until they have a chance to take a few bites before I go back and get seconds or start moving around in other capacities. So the soup course, there is an official way to eat soup, is to spoon away from you, just so you don't spill it on yourself. This is one of those things I think nobody's really going to notice if you don't spoon your soup the right way. But here we don't want to slurp. The other thing that, especially in really formal situations, is crackers. So I love to crumble up my saltine crackers in my soup instead of dipping or eating them on the side. But in a nice situation, I'm probably going to make a mess if I do that. So here I'm just going to be cognizant of not crumbling things in my soup. Also, I'm not going to, if it's like a vegetable soup, I'm not going to hunt down that last green bean, even if it's delicious. I'm not going to be chasing food, because then people kind of start to look over and go, what is she doing? Does she not eat? So things to keep in mind here. Some challenging food situations that we sometimes bump into. So if you are a picky eater, or have dietary restrictions, these are actually two different things. So if you're a picky eater, my tip to you, eat a little something at home before you go somewhere that you have no control over the food you're being served. So that if you like what's there, great, eat it. But if you don't, you're not starving afterwards, because because what you don't want is a rumbling belly, because you can't eat it. Dietary restrictions, within reason, people are usually going to ask about that. Now, if you are one of those people who's allergic to every food under the sun and can only eat bread, you probably can't even have bread if that's you. You can only eat one really random item. Or I had years ago a student that I supervised. He was a bodybuilder, and so depending on what exercise he was doing, it determined what he could eat. Now those situations, that's where I would advise eat something ahead of time, because, if we start getting a laundry list, it gets really tricky for people to plan around. But if it's, oh, I'm gluten intolerant or I'm lactose intolerant, that would be absolutely appropriate to tell folks ahead of time. Because if I'm hosting you, I want you to enjoy the food. I take pride in the things I make, and I want others to enjoy it as well. And there are little shifts that can be made ahead of time. If there's something in your food, just subtly tell someone. We don't have to make a big show of it. If you're in a restaurant, they'll just bring you another one. Now, if you're in somebody's home and there's like a dog hair in the food, maybe we just do the push it around the plate, make it look like we ate it, and and just not eat the rest of it. That could be a possibility. Overcooked and undercooked happen. Undercooked is a health problem. And so you really need to tell somebody because we don't want anyone to get sick. That would just mortify most people if their guests got sick from their food. If it's overcooked, you really don't like it, just cut it up, pretend you ate some pieces and just to kind of humor them a little bit, and you don't have to eat it. The dietary restrictions also come back to the health piece too. So let's say we are allergic to everything under the sun. It's still okay to ask and say, you know, what's in this salad? And because you don't want to, nobody would want you to have an allergic reaction to something. So bottom line with all of this, is it a health problem or is it a preference thing? And then difficult foods, I just would avoid them unless you're really confident in your skills. Like when I'm on an interview, I do not get anything pasta. I love pasta, but I will not order it. And I'll eat my pizza with a fork because it's easier to control. I never eat pizza with a fork. So just be cognizant of, is it worth the potential disaster that could happen if I get this? The salad course, the main thing here to keep in mind is just cut stuff up if it's too big. Like if there's a giant wedge of cucumber, you don't have to eat it all at once. So small bites is the rule of thumb when you're eating around other people. When you're at home, do what you want to do. You know, when I'm at home, I don't necessarily worry about it quite as much. But when I'm trying to, if I'm at somebody, even just a friend's house too, I usually cut a little bit nicer than I do at home. And if you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to eat everything that's served to you. So some salads are just not your thing. That's okay. Salad dressing, you may have to pass it around the table. If there's a couple of them, make sure everybody gets both. You know, you don't want the ranch to get stuck halfway around the table. We want to get it all the way around so that everyone can pick and choose what they would like. So passing items. One thing to think about here is to not take the last of anything. So ask for more. Like let's say there's a bread basket. Instead of taking the last roll, I might say, does anybody else want more rolls? And if people say no, then I can grab it. But if people say, yeah, I'd like another roll, then I'm just going to ask my server and say, could we get a refill on the bread? And they will bring us more. Or if we're starting to run low on ranch, just kind of making things easier for other people. Also, we're going to offer to the person next to you and then pass it. So we're going to offer, let me get my directions right. I think I have it popping up. Yes, offer left and then pass to the right. What that does is it's considerate of another person, but I get it next. I don't have to be so self-sacrificing that I have to wait for everybody else to get it before me because it's going to come to me and then we're going to keep it going around. If somebody doesn't do this, don't worry about it. If they don't know about it and it somehow skips you, then you could just say, hey, would you mind passing the rolls? I didn't get one. And we'll pass them back your way. Again, being graceful and kind and not drawing attention to people's errors. All right, another true false. In a professional setting, it's okay to share food if you're seated next to someone you know. A friend or a significant other or a family member. All right, let's share results here. And yes, that's false. So this one hurts my heart a little bit because I don't know if there's other foodies out there. I like to try a lot of different things. So my husband and I often will get 2 dishes and then split them in half so we can try different pieces. I'll throw this question out to everybody. Why would this be a problem in professional settings? Even if it's like your best friend sitting next to you. Go ahead and throw in the chat box how this could create an issue. It can cause a mess. Yeah, that's what a lot of this comes back to, is just not making a giant mess. Yep, we can spill. drop it. Absolutely. If we're leaning over, we could hit the server. Yep, we're excluding others too. Absolutely. Yeah, I have been in situations where people only do something with their best friend, and I'm like kind of going, oh, am I chopped liver here? Yep, allergies. Yep, absolutely. And allergies are a big one we have to be really aware of right now, more than ever, I think. Yeah. Yep, so we're just going to avoid this. If there's something you don't like I don't love cherry tomatoes, so when I get to the salad course, I'm just going to push my cherry tomatoes out of the way instead of scooping them onto the plate of somebody who actually likes them. Okay, so silverware placement. Old school presentations like this talked about how to cut and all of those. I scrapped that for today because I think nobody really pays attention to that anymore, except for maybe some people who are really hooked on kind of solid manners. But this is helpful because it will help your server know when you're done or whether you're still eating. So there's two styles in the US, American and continental. Resting position tells your server, please don't take my plate. I'm still working on it. The finished position says you can go ahead and clear. I've been in situations where servers didn't know this and they go to grab my plate because it looks like I'm done, but I've got a few more bites and I was planning to eat them, and I kind of just have to let the plate go because it's weird to claim it back again. So we're just sending those subtle reminders to folks. And if you don't get it quite right, I think that, that's fine. You'll notice the big differences. Are the utensils separated quite a bit, or are they close together? And that will help folks know. Okay. So the entree, a couple tricks here. We're not going to go into just specifics of how to eat everything, but work around the plate. So if it's chicken, let's say we're eating what we have pictured here. I'm not going to eat all the chicken and then all the veggies and then all the potatoes. I'm going to eat bits and pieces. Also, we're only going to cut a few things at a time. So when I'm at home, we like to eat out on our deck, and I don't like bringing a knife out with me because I don't want to set it on our patio table. So I usually just cut the piece of chicken, all of it up, so I can just eat it easier. If I'm in a nice setting, I need to go, just cut 2 bites, eat them, cut a couple more bites, eat them. And I'd also recommend taking small bites because oftentimes these environments you're talking. And usually the rule of karma is as soon as you get food in your mouth, that's when somebody asks you a question. And then you have that awkward chewing moment where you're all like staring at each other as you chew. And it's just kind of weird for everybody. So if we take smaller bites, then if someone asks you that question, you can finish your food quick and then answer. All right. Here's one. My mom does this a lot. My mom loves salt. And so she just dumps the salt on before she even tastes it. In the chat box, go ahead and share what message might that send. If you're at somebody's house and you do that, or a restaurant, if you're dumping extra seasoning on, what does that tell them? You don't trust the food. The food isn't good. Absolutely. You're assuming they're not seasoning things enough. Yep. All of those things that we don't really want to communicate. Now, are there people who don't use enough salt? Yeah, there are people who don't use enough salt. But these are the settings we pick and choose our battles. And here you can add some salt. So it's not inappropriate. Like I cook with a little less salt. So if I was serving food, you could definitely add more. It wouldn't hurt my feelings. It's just when people are dumping the whole salt shaker. And I'm like, oh, okay, you don't like my food. Right or wrong, just not the vibe we want. All right, ordering off of menus. This is something that we sometimes run into, that you go to a restaurant, somebody invites you, and you don't know what to order because there's like $50 items and there's $10 items. So a couple tricks that I use. I will ask, what do you recommend to the person who invited me? And then I look at the price and I find something that is a similar price. So if they're telling me something that's $30, if what I want is $30, that tells me they've got budget for that. Now, if they say, oh, the burgers are great, I'm probably going to do more of a burger or a sandwich or a salad, something like that. You don't have to use their suggestions, but just to kind of figure out what the plan looks like. Also, ordering off the menu, you're not going to order kind of the appetizer and the main meal and the dessert. If there are appetizers and desserts, they will have already been incorporated somehow. Maybe they ordered it for the table or whatnot, so you're just worrying about your entree. And then here, try not to make too many swaps. So if you don't like most of what it is, pick something different. There's a difference between, can you go light on the mayonnaise, or I'm allergic to this, can I get it this way instead? And the really big, complicated, take this off, cook this way, 20 instructions kind of thing. That can send a message that you're high maintenance or picky, which again are not the vibes that we want to give off. Now, when they get to know you better, like let's say it's a good friend, totally different. I've got some coworkers that we go out to lunch together. We know each other really well. And some of them will make a lot of swaps. Very, very different because I know them much more than I would if it was my first meal with them. And I can tease them about being picky too. So it's just a different dynamic, and they'll tease back. Dining in other cultures, this one is a little bit tricky because we're talking about like American cultural traditions. If any of you have traveled to other countries, you'll know there's just all these unwritten rules that you may or may not know. So I think the trick here is to watch others around you and do a little research ahead of time if you can. In high school, I went to France, and our teacher gave us a heads up that in France, the shrimp come with the eyes. And so we got a heads up, and she's like, if you're in a restaurant and you want shrimp, go ahead and order it, but just so you know, it's going to look a little different. And you have to kind of just get the meat of it out rather and work around that whole body of the shrimp. And so knowing that ahead of time, I think is helpful. But it's even just things like in Italy, I think it's cutting the pasta, I think somebody told me, is awful. Like it's an insult. I wouldn't have thought that. Like here, I cut my pasta, especially in a restaurant, so I don't get it everywhere. So just paying attention. Or there's some cultures where slurping is actually a compliment. It says, oh, I love your cooking. And so if others are slurping around you, instead of thinking, oh, that's rude, it's probably a cultural thing. So I think, yeah, just watch other people. And if somebody points out you've done something wrong, just be ready to pivot. Usually they won't, but keep that in mind. Receptions and buffets, these are a little bit a thing of the past right now. I don't know when the buffet is going to come back again. But if you have a buffet, we don't want to crowd that plate, and we don't want to look like we haven't eaten all day, and you don't want to go back like 5 times. Now, you can go back a couple times. Oftentimes, there's smaller plates, and so I'll get my food, I'll go talk to people for a little bit, and then I might go back up again. I might go talk with some more people, and because it's meant to be that type of environment. But we want to be cognizant of that. If you don't know what it is, I generally don't take it. I'm pretty adventurous with food, but it's just awkward when you get something in your mouth and you realize you hate it. And then you're like, I don't know how to gracefully spit this out without looking like a fool. And so I'm a little bit cognizant of things that I don't know if there's no label. Also allergies, we've been talking about allergies. So really try not to mix and match the spoons. I was on a cruise a couple of years ago, and I watched somebody put a spoon in a different dish, and I had to tell somebody because I was so worried that there was cross-contamination and someone was going to get sick. So try to be aware of that. And if a spoon falls on the floor, you can just let them know, oh, we need another spoon, or if something is empty, if you see the server, you know, oh, this is empty when you get the chance. Oftentimes they'll help you out. All right, and then last but not least here we have dessert. Best part of the meal in my opinion. Similar tricks to what we've been doing with other parts of the meal. You know, not cutting it all up at once, not taking giant bites. Some desserts are really messy, like they're pretty, they're beautiful. At Tech, one of the desserts they do sometimes for these dinners just to make people have a degree of challenge. It's like a waffle cone with chocolate on it and chocolate mousse inside of it. It's awesome, but it's really fun to watch people try and figure out how to break the shell without making pieces fly everywhere. So if you like the chocolate shell, eat the chocolate shell, but you know, instead of smashing it like we might at home, think about, is there a better way to do it? Okay, so after your meal finishes up, one last question for everybody. What should you do? So you're going to check all that apply. Let's see what we thought here. So it's actually just the thank you note. This one's a little bit tricky because I gave the illusion there could be more options. So paying the bill and leaving a tip. If you have been invited, you don't need to worry about that. So if, when I go to a conference, for example, we get an employer often invites us out to dinner with some other schools that they recruit at. They're going to pay the bill. That's fine. That's kind of this understatement. The thing to keep in mind, you will get the bill if you have to pay it. So they will make sure that you have a piece of paper in front of you with the bill on it. And so I do, one rule of thumb, I do keep a credit card or cash with me just in case. So a lot of times I'm like 99% sure somebody else is paying, but I'm not totally sure. I always have that with me. And for you all, that might also translate into, like, I remember when I was in high school, I would get invited places with my friends' families, and I was never quite sure if I needed to pay or if their families were going to cover it. So I just always kept it on me. And then the box for leftovers. This one is going to depend. Now, going back to my example of my coworkers that I know really well, we can do a box for leftovers, no problem. But if it's a job interview, where am I going to put it? Or if it's somebody I'm trying to impress, unless others are doing it, like if they get a box, I will, but I'm a little more hesitant with that one. The main one, though, is the thank you note. This could be handwritten. This can be an email. Sometimes it's nice to get a handwritten thank you note because we don't do those anymore. But sometimes it's just easier to send an email saying, hey, thanks for a great meal. I appreciated it. Okay, so let me click out of my polls here. So I'll click out of my screen and see what questions you all have for me. Are there weird food situations you've encountered, or are there things that you anticipate? And you can either throw it in the public chat or send it to me privately if you don't feel comfortable asking it publicly. What if you're a fast eater? That's a great question. So if you're a fast eater, one thing you can do is set your utensils down more. Because if you leave those utensils in your hand, you're just going to keep eating. Versus if I take a bite, set my fork down, it's going to slow me down a little bit. Also, asking people questions and being aware of the conversation piece maybe will shift some of the focus from your food to more of the conversation. Let me see here. What about traditionally Asian dishes? Chopsticks. Yes, chopsticks. So this is one that, so if it's a restaurant, sometimes they'll give you utensils or chopsticks. You get to pick. I am not particularly great with chopsticks, so if I have a fork sitting there, I'm probably going to use it. If there's only chopsticks, I would say do the best you can. There's a proper form and an art to that. I'm not good at that. I have tried it. And so in that moment, I'm going to do the best I can to pick up my sushi. So I think more you're going to run into chopsticks dilemmas, probably American culture. If you're going to a country in Asian culture that uses chopsticks, I'd probably practice ahead of time because that's a good guess we're going to run into that over there. How would you approach speaking about allergies with a lunch during a job interview? Yeah, so a couple of things we can do preemptively. You can, if it's a menu, you can ask your server for a little bit of help, and that would be totally appropriate to say, I have some food allergies. What would you recommend? Especially like garlic. If you have a garlic allergy, that's going to be a great one to ask because the garlic hides a lot of places. Now you can also mention it ahead of time. So if they say, oh, I'd love to take you to lunch, you can mention that, you do have some food allergies. Just wanted to let them know as they're picking the restaurant. Because if you tell me you're allergic to garlic, we're probably not going Italian. There's a lot of garlic in a lot of those dishes. Or if you tell me that you have a gluten allergy, I'm probably not going to take you to a pizza place because you're only going to be able to get salad. So I think as long as we don't make a really big deal out of it, people are usually very able to accommodate. Messy or unmessy foods to avoid at restaurants. Yeah, pasta anything is typically really hard to do. Like burgers that have ingredients spilling out of them, those are also delicious, but not going to be great. It doesn't have to be boring like a salad. I love salads, but they get a little boring sometimes. So you can do sandwiches. Sandwiches are usually pretty safe because chips and fries, all of that's pretty easy to eat. A lot of meats, like if it's a dinner plate type thing, like chicken or steak or pork, you can usually eat that pretty well too with rice. Let me see, I know we're right up against time and y'all have other places to go. So slow eaters. I think here, just do the best you can to keep up with your eating as you go. And then maybe if you're a slow eater, eat a snack ahead of time in case you don't have time to finish your meal. Eat shrimp that still has shells on it. Yeah, that one's tricky. I would honestly avoid things in a shell if I'm in a formal setting because that one gets a little messier. Sometimes you can use a spoon to kind of get the seafood out of it. Okay to tell the host about dietary restrictions. Yes. If you're a vegetarian, absolutely let them know ahead of time because then they'll plan accordingly. Or take you to a restaurant that they make sure has vegetarian dishes that aren't just spaghetti. Using a knife and fork, can we switch from one hand to another? I think, the utensils, the how to use the utensils, I think there's a little bit less pressure with that because no one's watching quite as close. Miss Manners has a rule of thumb for it, but I think you can switch hands if you're ambidextrous or if you want to use a formal technique to cut, absolutely go for it. If you don't know how the formal methods, you probably won't have it counted against you. All right, so if I could just get maybe a thumbs up if this was helpful. Did we learn some things? Awesome, awesome. So keep in mind, rule of thumb here is just don't make a mess, and make others feel comfortable and focus on the conversation. And if we can do all of those things, then we'll have some successful meals. So I know we are right after 1 o'clock. Have an awesome, awesome rest of camp. If there's anything we can help you with in the Career Center, my name's Heidi. Go ahead and reach out. Bye, everybody.